Good evening and welcome to Expat Insights. I'm your host Raju Mandia, and a happy new year to all of you, the viewers of Expat Insights. Here at Expat Insights, we take external views of internal successes by foreigners, expats, and people who have made Philippines their home. We look at their lives here in the Philippines. We look at what good they do to the Philippines. Today, our guest was born in England, raised in Kilrush Island. He should have become one of the Beatles back in the 60s. But his profession was a nurse and a keynote speaker in the 70s and 80s. Here in the Philippines, he's been an author, a teacher, a philanthropist. Let's welcome Englishman and Irishman, Mr. Joe Riley. Yo.
I'll sing this.
Okay.
Woo. I'm a Filipino now.
Whoa.
I'm a Filipino now. What you gallo I can I eat with a spoon and a fork. I'm a Filipino now. And these are the experiences expats have. I got in a taxi the other day. I said, hey, meet in the line. He said, hey, you speak a Tagalog. I said, hey, konti lang. I'm a Filipino now.
All right. Thank you very much. So, Joe, why did you not make it with the Beatles?
Oh, I didn't. Actually, the Beatles were after my time, believe it or not.
After your time?
Yeah, I was born in 19... And
19 whatever.
No, well,
yeah.
actually, the one person that I only knew in the Beatles, you got to remember in those days when we played on stage, in the rock and roll years, the one person I did know very well out of the Beatles was Ringo Starr, and he
the
performed.
drummer. Yeah.
He performed with a group, what I consider, and I think if you asked any rock and roll guys of those days, they would have told you the greatest rock and roll singer in Liverpool was a guy called Rory Storm. And
Rory Storm.
Rory Storm and he was a fantastic guy, great individual. Spent a lot of time with him over the years. Went to Germany together. We played on the Liverpool scene, but we went to mainly we played at a place called in England. They have resorts. Holiday resorts called Butlins.
Butlins?
Butlins Holiday
As in like
Camp.
B-U-T-T?
Yeah. Butlins Holiday Camp, they got a big fence all the way around them and Alsatian dogs and things. That's to keep you in. It's not to let
Dogs
you,
to keep you in.
Yeah, not to let you out. You know
Right,
what I
yeah.
mean? So, but we used to play there. Through the daytime, we were redcoats. And at night,
Like on a horse? Like on a horse?
No,
With a
no.
mustache?
A redcoat is a guy who's and our job was like through the day we'd have to organise a football match for the children. Or,
Not go and shoot Indians in America?
No,
Okay.
we didn't do any of that.
Okay.
I think Ringo would have. Ringo used to turn up and he used to hate kids and he used to frighten the living daylights of them just to get rid of them.
What city or what part of England was this?
Well, I first went when I went to Liverpool.
All right, that's where they were born.
I was in Liverpool. Well, I was in Liverpool. I was fortunate. I was fortunate in that I lived through the rock and roll years. I was part of the rock and roll years. Part of being on stage. Well, first time I met the Beatles, and I actually mentioned it in the book, and through the rock and roll years, and that was. We used to play at a place called Litherland Town Hall. And Litherland Town Hall was a great rock and roll place.
Say that name again.
Litherland Town Hall.
Litherland Town Hall, okay.
That was where we used to play there. And another place we played at was called the Oral Park Ballroom, or we used to call it the OPB. Now, those places were owned by the same company. So what would happen in a night is we would be bottom of the bill at Litherland Town Hall, and then we'd pack our things up, get in the back of a van, and head off over to OPB, and we'd be top of the bill. And bottom of the bill over there would have been Jerry Marsden, Jerry and the Pacemakers.
Who are these people?
Jerry
Another
and
group of rock and rollers?
Jerry Marsden was possibly the most famous. You'll hear Never Walk Alone. That's
Never,
Jerry.
Okay, all right. You can strum that later.
No.
Okay.
Anyway, but Jerry was, his most famous song is, of course, You Never Walk Alone,
Right.
which is the national anthem of Liverpool Football Club, which just happens to be my club. So, you know.
Your football team.
That's right. So he actually sometimes stands in the middle of Anfield and he stands there and sings it. And Jerry is, well, he's about the same age as me. But we were before the Beatles time. The Beatles came along a few years later. They were the youngsters. And one of the things that I mentioned...
Beatles were the youngsters?
Yeah, they were the youngsters. Well, they were. Because what had happened is while we were in transit from Litherland Town Hall to there, and Jerry was going back over to Litherland, they would have what we call a nomad group in the middle.
Right.
Somebody who's just starting up. And in those days, one occasion that I was there was, of course, I didn't know them then, it was the Beatles, and there was 5 of them.
Yeah.
There wasn't 4 of them, there was 5 of them. And
there were
this
5
young
of
lad
them to start with? To start with, there were 5 of them?
Yeah.
Who was the 5th?
The 5th one, he was a young lad. Can't remember. He died in Germany, from what I gather, later on. Very young.
Before they became really popular.
Oh yes, before they became. And he was. He couldn't really play, but he was the guy with the money.
All right, Joe. Today, we're here to talk about your life in Kilrush. Number one, your life in the Philippines and the good you do for the children in the Philippines. But before we start questioning about what you do in the Philippines, can you fast forward your life back from the days of the Beatles to what brought you to the Philippines and what keeps you here? Your beginning days in the Philippines.
I first came to the Philippines in 1992. Found it to be, you know, a wonderful place.
Right.
And around about, say, 12, 13 years ago, I think like most people you do, I met a very beautiful young lady, and
almost everyone who comes to this chair says they met a beautiful lady. I don't see people meeting a beautiful guy.
No, well, no, actually,
not
no.
yet.
No, I'm not into it. No. But I met and eventually we had 3 children, so eventually we stayed here. So I stayed here in this country, and I think it's a beautiful country. It's a wonderful.
Well, what
country.
brought you here? The girl brought you here, or you just came?
No, it was work. It was.
Right. What kind of work was that?
I still do the same today, and that's IT software development,
right,
and basically we do local, what we term as a local recruitment system. That's about all. Supplying very highly talented people for highly specific jobs.
Right. That's the business you run now.
Yep.
And it's still active. It's doing good.
Yeah, we've been here now 12 years.
TIM, is it called
TIC?
TIC. How many people do you employ with it?
I call it TIC, Tick, because that's where I'm from.
Yeah.
I'm Tick and I'm Irish. That's the Irish side of me, Tick.
The Tick, okay. So how many people do you employ, and
we
what
have
kind of
about,
industries
we
do you
have
serve?
about 50 people at the moment.
Right.
We're looking at expanding that, and we do support. We do support for banks, mainly in the UK and America. We do a lot of software development for fraud. We love people who are fraudsters because we've got without them we wouldn't have a living. You know, we just.
All right. You also are the founder of one foundation, and you also taught at the Philippines Women's University. Is that correct?
I was at the Philippine Women's University. Throughout my life, when I left playing on stage, way back many years, which I think was you do something in your life. I was playing on stage. We were doing about 3 gigs a night.
Here in the Philippines? Or?
No, this was in Liverpool.
Right.
And we had to pack our things, go up and play, finish there, play somewhere else. And we had a manager who was crazy. But what happened was I collapsed and I ended up in hospital. In a little hospital in a little town in Lancashire called Ormskirk. And I collapsed. I was admitted to hospital. I was unconscious for about a day. And it was basically, it was pure exhaustion from being on the road. and not getting enough rest and burning the candle, because we'd finish at 2 o'clock in the morning at a nightclub at Southport Casino, and what would happen is we would end up going to parties. But when I was in hospital, there was an old man across the way from me.
Yeah.
I'll never forget him. And sorry, I get a bit emotional.
Yeah, yeah.
The guy, the nurses couldn't look after him.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah.
So I used to read the paper, light his cigarettes. Oh no, he used to light them for him and feed him and looked after him. And the day I left the hospital, he started crying. And I decided from that day
to become a nurse.
That was the guitar. Put the guitar away.
Now, took up the nursing uniform.
And I became a nurse.
Joe, let's take a break here. Let's take a break for a glass of water, and we'll come back and talk to you more about nursing and children. Ladies and gentlemen, that's Joe Riley from England, and we'll come back and talk to him about nursing and children in the Philippines. So stay with us. This is Expat Insights. I'm your host, Raju Mandian. Welcome back to Expat Insights. I'm your host, Raju Mandian. We are still talking to Joe Riley of England, and he was telling us about his move into the nursing profession after giving up on being one of the Beatles. So, ladies and gentlemen, stay with us. So, Joe, you made a move and you decided to become a nurse after that incident in the hospital. What city did you say that was?
I was in Liverpool.
And
in Liverpool, and that was again very early. Actually, in the 60s, I trained at a place called Walton Hospital, and from being a street kid, which basically that's what I was a street kid, I went into the nursing profession, and I actually hold a lot of qualifications in nursing. I have a degree from Cardiff University in Wales, but mainly my time in nursing was in education. I was a director of nurse education in the UK. Yeah. I joined an American company called AMI, and I became the director of nursing for AMI in London for the most prestigious hospitals. And I think from a young kid that was abandoned, I didn't do too bad. Yeah. So I went on from there to, I was then appointed or asked to go to Egypt, to Cairo, and set up an educational program.
Was this in the 70s or?
Very late 70s, and I went there as the director of nurse education, and while I was there, about 2 weeks after I was there, the director of nursing got fired, and somebody pointed a finger and said, "Joe, you are now the next director of nursing." I said, "That's very good. How much money do I get?"
So my image of nursing is a woman in a white dress with a white hat. But how did the world take to you, such a huge, big Irishman, to be a nurse? I mean, what kind of impression did you create on people at that time? And how did the world take to a male nurse in those days?
Actually, when I first started nursing, I applied at the hospital. You remember me saying about the hospital, Ormskirk Hospital, the hospital I was in. But in those days, it was very prejudiced against males, and they didn't train male nurses. So I had to go to a very large hospital, which was Walton Hospital.
You were like 30-something at that time?
Yeah, no, I was 21.
Oh, 20. You were a
very young kid.
Yeah, okay.
And I went into nursing, and then I did all of the different. But when I went to Cairo, I became the director of nursing, which, again, as you say, a male director of nursing was something. I got there not because of anything, but because of my qualifications and because of my attributes and my management skills throughout the year. But going from director of nurse education to a director of a hospital, especially a very large hospital, a private hospital like the Asalam, I then set up educational. While I was doing that, they still kept me at education. And I set up educational programs for St. Michael's in Singapore, in Australia, and that's how I eventually ended up in Australia.
Compare the nursing profession in the 60s. Was that in the 60s?
Yeah, 70s.
60s and 70s. then globally and to the nursing profession here now in the Philippines? How do you compare and contrast the nursing industry? How does it look to you today?
Well, I think the Philippines nurse, or the Philippine nurses are, without a doubt, some of the best nurses in the world, without a doubt, because they have a quality. You see, it's like this. If you get somebody with an attitude, if you get somebody with the right attitude, who can have the right personality,
right,
you can train them.
Correct.
But if they haven't got the attitude, you
you
can't give them the knowledge.
Even though you train them.
Yeah. But the natural thing about the Filipino nurse is she's so caring, really
The word is cariñoso. The word is cariñoso.
Believe me,
all right,
whatever that is,
yeah,
that's what they've got. And that's why, you know, but the one thing about here is the education system lets them down. It really does let them down. For instance, like knocking on the door at the moment in Australia, they're short of 67,000 nurses.
Whoa.
And our nurses here in the Philippines don't qualify.
Australia needs 64,000 nurses as of this moment.
Right.
How many does Philippines churn out per annum? How many kids?
About 40,000 an annum.
Nurses come out of schools and colleges.
And then they've got nowhere to go.
I thought nursing was one of the better professions to be in today.
Well, if you want to find a lot of nurses, go into one of the major shopping stores or beauty salons and you'll find a lot of nurses who are working there because they can't get a job.
But in the recent times there were doctors and people who were moving to the US, taking up nursing as a job instead of being doctors. So I thought the demand was huge and we were filling that demand. So that you're saying is not true?
It's not true. Absolutely, because the thing is, what it is the Philippine nurses' qualifications doesn't meet the standards of England. You see, the basic standard in the world, there's 5 countries.
Yeah.
You've got the UK, Ireland, Australia, New Zealand, and Canada. Now, America doesn't come into that. They all have, in other words, nurses can transfer from any one of those countries to any other.
They can hop from one job to another. Okay.
And they don't have to do any qualifications. But a nurse here, because the educational standard of the nurse does not meet that standard, the nurse here, if they can get a job, to be a state registered nurse, they have to do what is called supervised practice. In other words, they have to do another 6 months of training in the UK
when they get to the
country.
Okay, okay.
And that's what stops the nurse. But there is a lower nurse.
There's a what?
What we call a lower class of nurse,
right,
which is called an enrolled nurse. And a lot of these nurses here do qualify for that.
So what can we do? What can you and I or the Philippines do to qualify these nurses to get those jobs, to fill those jobs? What changes do we need to bring about in the nurse educational system or the nurse qualifying system? What are your tips?
You've just hit it right on the head. You see, it's not rocket science.
Right.
If the standard of qualifications is 100 in the UK, Australia, in wherever it is in the world,
right,
but ours is only 80, it's not rocket science to say, let's look at that curriculum,
yeah,
and develop the curriculum here in this country so the nurses, this is exactly what I wanted to do quite a few years ago when I was at the Philippine Women's University, to develop the curriculum to this English standard, present it to the UK standards, because I was an assessor, an examiner for the General Nursing Council many years ago.
Here in the Philippines?
No, in the UK.
In the UK, okay.
I used to go around hospitals and check that everything, or their standards were right. If we had a failure rate that you had in this country, we'd close nurses down, nursing schools down. And when I say that, for instance, take last year or the year before, I think it was, you had a 49% pass rate.
Yeah.
That's a 51% failure rate.
With the nurse licensing board, is that where the nurses graduate from to become nurses and go abroad? Is that right?
Yes.
Nurse licensing board. So what department controls that? Is it Department of Education? Is it
It would have to be the Department of Education who holds the responsibility of, for instance, if somebody has to license these nursing schools.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
Whoever licenses them. But who polices them? Nobody.
Who polices the licensing
Of
institutes?
those? Yeah, because you have nurses out there, right? And you have some nursing schools, and they don't have any passes whatsoever.
Yeah.
Nobody passes.
But Joe, wait. I am sure that the people in power realize this and know this, no? The question is, what can their challenges be? Are they challenges of budget and finance? Are they logistical challenges? It could not be lack of information. So what do you think are their challenges, and how can you, coming from your background, give them the suggestions or the advice? What do you think could be their challenge?
Very simple. Nurses bring in, they tell me, somewhere in the region of $8 to $9 billion a year into this country.
Right.
Right? That's an awful lot of money.
I think OFWs brought $64 billion last year, which was the biggest stake.
I mean, I'm going back a few years, but I'm sure it's...
Well, I'm thinking OFW, that includes sailors and domestic workers.
Well, these nurses bring in, and how much more could they bring in if we
Twice as
raised the education and said to the UK, said to Australia, Australia, look, we want to train our nurses to your standard.
Right, right.
But the nurses here do not meet that standard, which brings up another question.
Which is that?
And the question is, if they don't meet the standard of standard worldwide in education, then does that mean that you have a medical system that doesn't meet the first world?
Yeah. So, but the question is, Joe, what could their challenges be? Is it finance? Because there's no question of wrong intention here. I'm sure everyone wants nurses to go and get the jobs.
Simple.
That makes sense. But what can their challenges be? Can you place yourself in their feet and try to figure out what the challenges of the authorities might be?
I think the authorities, what they should do is, they should have an entrance exam. An entrance exam of whether nurses, because a 51% failure rate is, or 50% or whatever percent, even 20% failure rate is not acceptable. It would not be acceptable in a Western world. So what I say is, raise the standards. You've got these kids for 4 years.
Yeah.
Why not take that curriculum from another country and put it into here? What's wrong with that?
What are other countries doing? Other countries that provide nursing to these advanced countries, countries like Sri Lanka, countries like Malaysia, or maybe China and India. What are they doing? Are they doing anything different compared to Philippines? Or?
Well, actually, when I went to Australia, Australia was in exactly the same position as the Philippines is now. Nurses now.
How many years ago was this?
That's 20 odd years ago. In I started with the curriculum development in Australia in the early 80s. By late 80s, nurses who were trained in Australia were automatically accepted in the UK.
Yeah.
Because we raised that standard. They didn't have to do this.
So there was 100% acceptance.
Yes. They accepted the curriculum.
Right, right.
It's the curriculum they're accepting. After that, what it is, it goes, the authorities, nursing authorities in the UK will accept the curriculum and accept you. After that, it's a personal thing of the director of nursing whether your experience meets what we need in our hospital.
What about franchises like Racial Ward? Have you heard of that franchise? Because I've seen schools here which are American franchises. So I'm assuming that if they are American franchises, they follow the American curriculum. How about those?
You see, but the American curriculum is, the reason I didn't put it in the 5 is because if a nurse trains in California, she cannot practice nursing in New York.
Oh, it's different.
Each state has a different standard.
Okay.
They don't have a standard across the board, which is why you don't see many American, or any practically, I couldn't remember seeing very many at all, American nurses in my travels, because the training system is so different in each state that you know, it's very difficult.
So how about other countries like Bangladesh, countries like Sri Lanka, other poorer countries who are supplying nurses to the rest of the world? What do they do?
Two countries have Hong Kong, Hong Kong.
Yeah.
In Hong Kong, nurses in Hong Kong are accepted in Australia, New Zealand, and UK because they took the curriculum, said, okay, that's what's required at university. That's what we'll do.
Right.
And they did it, and so they did the same. Sri Lanka does much similar, and India has started to do an awful lot of it. But most of the nurses now going into the UK are coming out of Africa, South Africa.
What are they doing differently?
They've developed the curriculum to the standard of the 5.
Oh, all right, okay, great. Now, Joe, you also have a foundation called Cararoo. Right?
Yeah.
Where and how did that come about? Did it come about from your own personal childhood experience, or is this something you picked up right here in the Philippines? Can you tell us about Cararoo?
Well, the Cararoo Foundation is, I was on the board and I was the instigator of it.
Yeah.
I'm still associated on the outside of it at the moment.
Yeah.
But the Cararoo Foundation, about a few years ago, what we did is I started out many years ago feeding children in
I'm going to actually request the production to show the video clip of you and your kids. Okay, go ahead. Tell me the story though.
But basically, what had happened was that we used to feed people by the riverbanks. And these were children who have nothing and families who have nothing.
Yeah.
And they're very, these type of families need a lot of help. But what I used to do is lots of friends, like, how do you say, the penguins and other people always helped
Penguins?
out. Yeah.
People, penguins?
Penguins, yeah, they're nomads. Crazy gang of guys, Australians.
Oh, it's a club. It's a sort of okay.
And they give us money, rice, things.
Yeah.
And when we used to feed the children, like for instance,
this is the video that is about Cararoo Foundation, right? That's you?
That's me.
Okay.
With all the kids.
And these kids are still in one foundation, or you go around town?
No. This is the barrio. It's out in Merville. It's amazing how many people really don't know about the children there. And but the Cararoo Foundation, the name comes up from two things: Carabao, which is the Philippine,
which is the buffalo, the water buffalo,
Okay, Carabao, and on the other side is a kangaroo.
All right.
So we call it a Cararoo.
Oh. Okay.
So and that's what's on the emblem, which is a carabao and a kangaroo.
Yeah.
So that's how the name came up. But there you can see the website of it, and Murray, who does a great deal of work for us, he flies over. Murray Shockman, he's an Australian.
Yeah.
And he helps us he helps the foundation a lot in Australia. So he does very well. But
how many kids have you been able to feed and school through that foundation over the years? How old is Cararoo Foundation?
Cararoo Foundation is it's only about 2 years old in itself.
Yeah.
It took a long time to form it. There's a lot but feeding the kids and the families and everything has been going on for about 12 years, 13 years, something like that.
Feeding the families, all right.
Yeah, I've been doing that for
do you plan to make this self-sustaining and make it live on its own, or are you still hands-on with this business?
No, there are a lot of people now involved that actually, like Murray in Australia raises funds from Rotary Foundations and other places in Australia, and they fund children going to school here, which is really, really nice,
All right, Joe, we'll take a 2-minute break for the commercials and for the people who pay for this show, and we'll come back and talk to you about your vision for the children of the Filipinos and how we can improve looking after our kids in the Philippines. All right, hang in with us. Good evening, welcome back to Expat Insights. I'm your host Raju Mandian. We're still with English and Irishman Joe Riley, and he's telling us about how he cares for children in the Philippines. So back to Joe Riley. Joe, tell me something. you have this special heart for kids. For kids all across the world. I mean, you look like a big teddy bear out there. Now, what part of your life, what part of your past has made you this, such a sensitive, huge Santa Claus-like kind of a person?
I get asked to be Santa Claus every year.
You are. You have been asked to be Santa Claus?
Well, no, I usually do.
Oh, you're a perfect Santa Claus.
I used to do it at the Philippine Children's Hospital, because what we used to do there is we used to go to the two cancer wards.
Yeah.
And the two cancer wards.
PGH?
Yeah.
Okay.
And we used to, Santa's job was to go around, and these children, I mean, some of them would, they'd break your hearts.
Okay.
And, you know, but Santa was never allowed to cry. And I used to say to my people, if you're going to cry, get out. Go outside, please. You know, but anyway, the hardest part was dealing with the relatives and family. But these kids were so beautiful.
I have been to PGH. I know what you mean.
Well, we used to just do the two cancer wards, and the Penguins actually look after that for me now. They do a great job. A fellow called Brad Hannum. He is as bigger than me.
Who?
Brad Hannum. And
there's a guy bigger than you in this country?
Okay. He's bigger than me.
Does he fit into jeepneys?
Brad, you got that?
Okay.
But he's a great Santa Claus, and actually he's so big they actually had to make a suit for him. So anyway, but he does it now. But it's great to go. He'd kill me when he sees me. Anyway,
okay.
But we do that. But the reason I do, I was basically an abandoned kid.
You're going back to your past and telling me why you have this soft heart for kids. Okay. You were an abandoned kid.
I was basically a street kid. I was left in Ireland when I was a kid.
Okay. Yeah.
Very, very young.
Yeah.
I was about 5 years of age when I was about
left 4. By who?
My father left me in Ireland, and I went when he left me there, and he went off to some other part of the world.
Yeah.
And little Joe Riley was left in Ireland, and a family took me in and gave me basically the values that I have
This
today.
is a family you knew, or just any random family?
Did he leave you
at someone's doorstep?
No, a doorstep.
He left you at someone's doorstep, and he didn't know who they were?
No. Well, basically, he knew the son of the family worked with him, and he promised to make me a kite. So what I did is I went and sat outside his door waiting for my kite, and
so
the family brought me in.
Okay.
And I didn't see my father again for about another about 12 or 13 years when I saw him again. But I've always had this thing where, you know, as a kid, like going to school. I went to school there. I did everything. My education, I got very confused as a kid in school.
Why?
Well, basically, you know, when I went to this school and they said I was 5 years of age, and they're teaching me about the 3-in-1, God the Father, God the Son, and all the Ghost.
The Trinity, okay.
Yeah, the Trinity, and I got very confused by all of that, because I said that, you know, it was Christian brothers, and they were very wicked people, these Christian brothers.
In Kilrush.
They used to beat you on the outside. And I said, so like they would tell me about, for instance, like that Jesus was the Son of God.
Right.
And of course, me being my inquisitive self said, well, was God married to Mary?
Right.
And said, no, he wasn't.
You got slapped around.
Got slapped around. I said, well, you said that he was the Son of God. Well, Mary must. He said, well, no. And he said, hey, this lad's an atheist. He said, come over here. Yeah. Anyway, the thing was that what he used to say is, well, who's he married to? I said, Joseph. Who's Joseph? And we used to get these sort of things. And as a kid, it was just basically, you know, I think every kid goes through the same thing.
Right.
But anyway, going back to the story is, when I came here, I saw so many children around that needed help, and that's basically what I set out to do. I set out the one thing about it was, when I first set out, I set out on my own. But what I did...
Cararoo? With Cararoo, or prior to that?
Just on
like
my
that,
own,
okay.
on my own. And what I did was,
Robin Hood.
People used to come and say to me, say, Joe, I'd like to help.
Yeah.
I said, you can help, but I will not accept money. And to this day, I never accept money.
Wow. Okay.
And these people, what they do is, I say, I'll tell you what you do. I need a ton of rice. for these people here.
So you get
So what they
charity in kind rather than cash.
So what they do is they get the ton of rice,
Yeah.
they get the receipt, they give me the rice, and we go out and give it out to the families.
Right, right. So
Now
you don't
we
have to do
end
any
up,
accounting. You don't become responsible for
no.
the money side.
That's what we did. That's what I did.
Yeah.
And so many people helped over the years from, there used to be the Golf Boys, that was Brian Lane.
Yeah.
The Golf Boys would give it, the boys down at Intramuros, they used to give money, or give goods, and Nomads football and rugby boys.
Yeah.
Each year they used to give, they'd give a ton of rice or something, and we would give this out with the help. We used to always say to anybody, please come along and help, and you know exactly where it's going.
Yeah, yeah.
And then we used to send a couple of ton of this rice out to kids' homes and orphan homes and places where it's needed. You know that.
Joe, if you were really and truly Santa Claus and you had no limitations on your resources, what would you do for the kids of the Philippines? What would you do if you had unlimited resources, unlimited power? What would you go out and change, and how many kids would you change, and how?
Oh, if I could do that and had a magic wand that I could wave and do it, I'd give them an education. Because these kids, some of these, do you know these kids that we had in school?
Yeah.
All of them, top of their classes.
The kids that we saw in the picture?
Yeah.
Okay.
They go out because they will go out there and they will try. They really, really try.
Okay.
So if I could, I'd give them education. The other thing, if I had unlimited funds, is a health system. Because when I go back to the children in the Philippine General Hospital, I'm being honest.
Right.
Every minister, every person in government who has any response should be taken by the hand and taken through that ward to see the suffering of these kids.
Right.
There's no air conditioning, there's no televisions, people, these kids are
Joe,
wonderful kids.
Isn't that the story of all developing countries, not just the Philippines? I think Philippines, the PGH is much better, but I've seen worse things in India. So, but it's a question of money and funding. So what can you do from where you are? How much effect are you creating with whatever little effort you make?
Well, we're doing it at the moment, aren't we? We do the education of children, and it's still at Christmas. We still go out and feed children, and I still do Santa Claus.
You still do Santa Claus, okay. All right. Now,
please don't ring me up. I don't want to be Santa Claus anymore.
I think you should be called for Santa Claus. People who want to have Joe as a Santa Claus next year, look up Expat Insights and we'll get him. Joe, tell me about this book.
Yeah.
Tell me about Ghosts of Kilrush. Tell me what Kilrush is, and why does it still haunt you? Does it still haunt you?
Really, it's people have asked me many times, what did I do when I left Kilrush?
Yeah.
And in that book is the story about Kilrush, about my years there and my years after. I think to go from a street kid, it just means that if you set your goals, set your objectives, set out your life, you will eventually get there. I mean, I'll be very honest. Early in my life, I chased success.
Yeah. So did everyone.
Yes, and that's the mistake you make. Because the mistake is success is not everything. The greatest thing
but there are very few 21-year-olds who don't chase success. I mean, how many 20-something are concerned about life as a whole? Not many. Come on. Yeah. So it's no big deal. So don't blame yourself. No,
but change it. You see, then later in life, what you do is you learn about the fulfillment of life.
You realize you're connected. You realize that everything is connected.
That's right. The fulfillment of life is possibly, it's that little bit. Most people in life, you go through life, you learn things, and they're the basic things in life. You toilet trained, you this, you that, you education, and it's a science. And like any science, you up the ante, and you can become successful. You
just mentioned that life is a science, and you're high on love and forgiveness. You want to tell me about that?
Yeah, well, you see, that's gone beyond the basics, because the basics is the success thing. But then you go to the fulfillment of life. And the fulfillment of life is different. That is the area of life where you find something in yourself. And when I say something in yourself,
Yeah,
it's
describe
this
that.
thing
Yeah.
about a discovery of forgiveness.
All right.
And to get to the fulfillment of life, you have to learn to forgive.
Yeah.
You don't have to learn, you have to learn to forgive yourself
Yeah.
and others. Sometimes it's harder to forgive yourself
That's
for the
beautiful.
mistakes that you've made in life.
Yeah.
But if you have them, you
Yeah.
see so many people in seconds, and I'm sure there are people listening to this program
Yeah.
who have experiences where they've said harsh words to a family member or somebody and opened a wound.
So
brothers.
what steps should I take if I want to forgive myself? What do I do? Sing to myself? Go to church? Make a confession? What do I do? Go down on my knees?
No. This is something you have to deal with within yourself.
All
It's
right.
dealing with the emotions of yourself. You got to remember, emotions drive people, and from that, but they tell us there are 5,000 emotions.
Yeah.
These researchers, experts, 5,000 different emotions in people, of which if you get 20 or 30 people and put them in a room and say, write down what emotions you get,
Yeah.
you know what happens? You use about 10 or 12 emotions in a week, and half of them don't make you feel too good.
And love and forgiveness leads that. Leads those emotions, is right. Love and forgiveness lists. All right.
Exactly.
Joe, it's been a pleasure. We are coming to the end of this show, and we've got 2 minutes. I want you to tell me what kind of legacy do you want to leave in the Philippines, and how truly a Filipino are you? Can you sing that to us?
Oh, sure.
All right.
Oh my God. This is a little song that's haunted me throughout the years, but the Philippines is a beautiful place, beautiful country.
Yeah.
And one of the things about it is that I was once told, do I have time to tell the story about my gentleman from the press secretary?
Which one is that?
Oh, basically what he did is he said...
You got 60 seconds, so you can do whatever you want.
Okay,
All right.
I'll sing this.
Okay.
Woo. I'm a Filipino now.
Whoa.
I'm a Filipino now. What together I can. I eat with a spoon and a fork. I'm a Filipino now. And these are the experiences expats have. I got in a taxi the other day. I said, hey, meet in the lang. He said, hey, you speak a Tagalog. I said, hey, konti lang. I'm a Filipino now.
All right. Thank you very much, Joe. It's been a pleasure. It was wonderful to have you here. So, ladies and gentlemen, that was Joe Riley, Englishman, Irishman, and a Filipino now. So, thank you for watching Expat Insights. I hope you enjoyed the show. Thank you for watching. Mabuhay and God bless.